Hello and welcome. I'm so excited to be talking with BrightFlame today. BrightFlame is the author of the debut novel, The Working, and she and I met actually in 1997 when I stayed at her turtle sanctuary when I was on my book tour in the East Coast. Do you remember that, BrightFlame?
I do remember that really well. I can't believe it's been that many years. But yeah, I welcomed you. We didn't know each other at all. You contacted me through some listings that I had, and it turned out that we had so many people in common, and we were in the same communities. And that I
Yeah,
even know your now wife, Cabelli.
yeah,
Um,
that's right. I forgot.
we looked at each other and you said to me, we could be sisters.
Well, we are sisters. I mean, we became fast friends and have been ever since. And so I'm really looking forward to talking to you about your journey as a writer and about this book. I know I've been privy to some of it, so I know it's been a long and interesting and winding journey, something that's going to be really helpful for people to hear. I think there's lots in your story that is very inspiring. So I'm definitely looking forward to having people hear it. So let's get started. So first I wanted to know is why did you write the book?
Well, two reasons really. The first reason is I teach in witchcraft topics, spiritual topics. And I had an ongoing class for years and taught other workshops and taught at witch camps in our tradition or my tradition, reclaiming tradition. And students would say, oh, write a book about your flavor of witchcraft. But I prefer reading fiction. It's really hard for me to sink my teeth into a nonfiction book. I should not say that too loudly. Um, and so I said, okay,
I'm
I'm
the
going to
same.
write a novel and it'll have that kind of stuff in it. But then the ancestor, the elder in this story actually is a foremother of mine from way, way back, an ancient foremother. The character of Annia, I hope you'll all read my book. The character of Annia is real, somebody I connect with through my ways and my tradition. And she offered a whole bunch of teachings and urged me or told me, get this out to the world. And so most of that is incorporated in the book, and I wove plot around that.
Mm, wow. So she gave you specific information that you gathered through trance and things like that?
Yeah, through trance
Mm,
journeys to meet with my ancestors. You know, this isn't a lineage I could trace. I get that she existed, or her lifetime that I was connecting to was a few millennia back,
mm-hmm.
when things were starting to change in Europe and Asia, going to the work of Marija Gimbutas about old Europe, and then the people of the horse and blade coming and shifting the world from a more peaceful, more matrifocal type of societies to what we call the Bronze Age, where heroics and warfare and conquering were lifted. And so Anya is from a time when those things were just starting to happen. And I
Mm,
bring that out in the book too.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I can see. I mean, as a novelist myself, I agree with you 100% about I love historical fiction, and I think it conveys um history in a much more interesting fashion. Personally, I like it. So I'm with you on that.
Though my book is contemporary, Brigid's
Right.
Charge, which I love, your book, is historical. And we share that type of ancestral revelations.
Hmm. Yeah, we do. We do. Yeah. mine was it was slightly different. So yeah, the ancestor in my book is um Deborah Leeds, and she's my 10-time great grandmother. And I always knew that, you know, about her notoriety as being Mother Leeds, the giving birth to the Jersey Devil. And I was after like what really happened. But, you know, I quickly realized that, you know, this stopping place for the historian is a starting place for the novelist because it was a legend and there's no factual basis to the legend. So that was like the starting place for me. And then I always wanted to make sure that I was telling a story that was true. Like that was really you know, especially since she was a real woman. So I kept checking in on that level through psychics, through my own questions, through my own you know, explorations. Um, and I kept getting yes, yes, yes. And also I kept writing things that I later would find out were true. So that also made me feel, I mean, that happened over and over and over again. I would write something and I always went past what I knew in the research, and then I would go back and research from that point and then find out that it was true. That happened so often. It just really made me feel like what I was doing was blessed in some way. You know, if not, I don't think it wasn't as overt as what you're describing. It was more diffuse, but I definitely got and was seeking messages because I wanted to do right by her and you know, by women, you know, accused of witchcraft, you know, so that was really important to me too. Like I had a psychic who once said to me, the women say yes, the women say yes. So that was powerful.
I came to
So
something like that because the other thing that I wove into the book are some teachings from the goddesses who I work with.
mhm,
And and I just point out I work with gods and goddesses, gendered and non-gendered, and it's particularly a few goddesses that I work with who come through in the book, but
mhm,
not with their names. I had to keep checking in. Are you sure this is okay to put publicly? Do you want this out there? And I'd
mhm,
often read the tarot to get answers because I wouldn't trust receiving
mhm.
them saying yes, and then
Yeah.
I would double check by reading cards to make sure.
Mhm.
Even right up to like the final edits right ahead of publication, I was saying, "You sure I should put this particular thing in there?"
Yeah. 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 It's you want to do it right. You know, you want to do it right. I really identify with that. So, you know, Starhawk, who is a person that we both know, an author of wonderful novels, love her novels, all of them. She says her fiction always starts with a question, which I just love that. And so, what was the question that you started with?
First of all, shout out to Starhawk's The Fifth Sacred Thing. I just love that novel and the prequel and
Yeah,
the sequel to it as well. And okay,
wonderful books.
tangent. It's so fun to find that Starhawk is showing up in solarpunk communities that I'm part of. She was the keynote to the solarpunk conference that I just offered a session at. And she's in the same anthology as me, Bioluminescent from
Oh,
Android Press. So we both have stories in there. So, yay, fun fact. But yes, a
yeah.
question, starting off with a question. So, my raison d'etre, especially later in life, has come to be how do we bring forward a bright future? Just, resilient, regenerative futures, and futures plural. It's not just one. But that's a main thread in the book. But more than that, it's how do we I don't even like using the word fight, but what do we do about this all pervasive Western culture, dominating culture that's based on greed, that's based on white supremacy, that's based on the accumulation of wealth that controls so much, at least in the Western world, and of course affects the global South and the so-called non-Western world as well. Like it's this thing has its claws in all of life. And it's harming the earth, it's harming the peoples of the earth, it's harming all life on earth. How do you fight something like that? So my
Mhm.
question became, what is the working that will help tip the balance, that'll help move us towards bright futures? And the
Mm.
fun thing is, or fun, it wasn't so much fun for me back then when I was writing the book. I didn't know the answer. Hey,
Mhm.
Starhawk, if you're listening, that's something I know you like. When you ask a question, you don't want to have known the answer. And that was true with me. I didn't know the answer. I didn't know what the working would be. And I think that's part of what took me so long to write this book. Um, I had to get to a place in my own magic and with what was coming through and the state of the world before things clicked together. And I found out what the working was.
Mm.
And the coven, my book centers around a coven of 5 people uh, from all their points of view and all their various subplots and threads coming together. Um, their quest to find the working amidst stuff happening. Um, in the world, things that people will recognize as what's happening now and slightly more fantastical, but not really fantastical
So
things.
for those who don't know, will you define what you, when you say the working, will you define that for people who don't know what you mean when you say that?
Oh, good idea. A magical working, a spell working, something that these witches can do energetically. It's working with energetics, particularly to tweak reality, to tweak um, the energetics of the thing, the entities that are harming the earth and everybody. So to energetic, find the energetics, the kind of succinct magic that will help declaw this thing and help us tip towards the kind of world we all want.
And that's really the central plot of the novel, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the central plot, and there's there's actually different strands of the plot because the witches are working in the ethereal, on the astral, in the astral realm, as well as in the mundane world, because they're battling a fracked gas pipeline that's being pushed through the coven's home, as well as battling this overarching thing that has its claws in all of the world, all
Mhm.
the uber capitalist, wealth accumulating, greed fueled everything that's, you know, creates all the policy, um, or almost all the policy, and even communities that it's not directly present in, it's still affecting. It's affecting all of us. I mean, climate change is fueled by this.
Mhm. So you're making it pretty clear that the book is not pure fantasy. And in fact, I think I've heard you call it fabulous. And so I'd love for you to define what you mean by that. And also, um, so you've taken license, you've described this as taking license only with some parts. So where did you stretch reality? And I'm also interested in where you didn't stretch reality. Because, you're talking about witches operating on a plane, and, you know, as a witch, you would call that real, right? So
Yeah,
it's an interesting mix of, like, I mean, for me, it brings up, like, well, what's real? Which I had a little bit of that in my book as well, the what's real kind of
yeah,
question. So
right.
there were a lot of questions in there.
Yeah,
Pick your choice.
so many threads. Well, first of all, the what's real brings me to I'm working on an essay about so-called magical thinking.
Mm,
That's not a slur because there are other ways of knowing.
love that.
Indigenous peoples know that there are other ways of knowing. It's even called in the academics, in academia, it's called indigenous science. Like
Mm,
like indigenous people are actually stepping into leadership positions, teaching, research, and bringing in these other ways of knowing as valid.
mm,
Um, you know, valid ways of knowing, valid sciences. So whose reality, right? That's one little thread there. And I want to also say I'm white, I'm not indigenous. These practices in my book come through my flavor of witchcraft, not from anyone else's tradition, and definitely not indigenous traditions. Um, but for those in the know about what witches do, how we work, traveling in the astral realm, which is, I like to say, adjacent to this realm that's the commonly held reality, that I can touch this cup, and I know that's real, and I can walk out the door and go outside into this lovely land that I call my home, and I say, okay, that's real. The trees, the grasses, the native plants, that's real. But also I can slip into the astral realm, which is a place that holds the energies of all possibility. And it's a place that we call the gateway to other realms. And some call it the other world, some call it the underworld, some call it the overworld. There's all different ways of working in the astral, and I don't know that there's a common to all sorts of witchcraft definition of the astral. That said, if you have some sense of how witches work, even people in other traditions who work on different planes of reality, a lot of what I bring in that happens on the astral realm is like, oh, right, yes, I can go there and see that too, for real. um, and where I stretch reality, um, I stretch reality, but also I don't stretch reality because I can conceive of this actually happening. The coven of my story are not people I know. They're not real people in this realm, though I've come to know them really well through the years, right?
as you do. Yeah.
And the creature, I don't want to give away too much of the
No, don't give
book,
away
but
too much, but
the
you can talk about the creature.
creature, yeah, the creature in the book is kind of the avatar of all that's wrong with the world. So the way the
Hmm.
creature comes through um, is fabulous, I'll say. And fabulism, for those who don't know, um, magical realism is a term when an author just shifts just one little aspect of the mundane world, and then it's deemed magical. But magical realism comes from Latinx communities who are um, working like revolutionary Latinx authors who really know two worlds, because
Mm,
there's the colonizers,
mm,
um, and magical realism works are often working kind of opposed to the colonizers, trying to take back
mm,
cultures and take back, or calling for justice. So magical realism is reserved for uh, people, Latinx writers
mm,
working specifically for that. So fabulism is for us white people who take reality and change just a few things, stretch just a few things. So even though I did the
mm,
genre dance of what do we call this book, and my publisher calls it contemporary fantasy, and even
mm,
calls it urban fantasy sometimes, which then I think of vampires and fake witches. So to me, it's not that. But you have to call it something to get on
yeah.
bookshelves and to get classified in the big um,
Yeah.
sites. So contemporary fantasy, but then also fabulous, though there's no category for fabulism really. Maybe some people
Mm,
can tag it that way in Goodreads.
hmm
For want of that category, a lot of white authors are being tagged as magical realism, but politically, I
hmm
don't like that. So I've really asked that they don't do that with my book. So
hmm
fantasy, and then we had to figure out a contemporary fantasy because it's real world stuff. But then the other kinds of classifications I put on it to help people know more about what my book is um, are eco-lit, environmental
hmm
literature, climate fiction, Cli-Fi,
hmm hmm
and solarpunk, uh,
hmm
which I call myself a solarpunk witch. So we won't go into what solarpunk is right now, but you can all look at my website and see lots about solarpunk because it's really my thing. I have a lot of short solarpunk stories out there too.
Okay, I was going to ask you, but I think sending them to your website is a good idea. So I'll let that one lie.
Okay, wait, I'll give you
Uh,
like a really short, like solar punk is a movement, an aesthetic, and a genre that is formed mutually by all the people coming together to create these just more bright, more sustainable
mm,
futures. Not
mm,
utopian in the that's how it'll be lovely for everybody and it's perfect Thomas More kind of sense, but more hopeful futures, optimistic futures. And it's a movement. There are solar punks out there doing this work now as a
mm,
different way of living. Solar punk isn't just about fighting what is, it's about creating what we want right now.
mm. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. So you said there's more information about that on your website, and you
A
have a lot of
lot
short
more.
fiction, solar punk fiction. So definitely we'll check that out for sure. Um,
BrightFlame.com.
yeah, we'll have it on the bottom, right? Somewhere on the screen where people can see it, I hope.
Yeah.